Dave sat by the window, the steady hum of the airplane's engines providing a comforting backdrop to the chaos swirling in his mind. He'd been in this exact position countless times, stuck in a cramped seat, heading to another business trip he couldn't care less about. Work had been a grind for months, and his personal life had started to feel like a long, monotonous blur. He'd hoped that this flight, this getaway, would offer some kind of escape, but as the plane ascended into the sky, his frustration only deepened. A glance to his right snapped him out of his reverie. The man next to him was odd. He didn't look out of place in terms of appearance, just an ordinary guy, about Dave's age, but something about him rubbed Dave the wrong way. Maybe it was his overly casual attire, or perhaps the way he kept tapping his fingers on the armrest as though he was deep in thought. Either way, Dave couldn't shake the sense of irritation that slowly built up the longer they sat there. After a few minutes of silence, Dave heard a quiet murmur. The man was talking to a flight attendant, and although Dave didn't understand every word, one thing stuck out: SpaceX, the man had said. Dave's ears perked up, but before he could process it, the flight attendant nodded with an unusually respectful demeanor. It seemed odd, considering how casual the guy looked. Without thinking, Dave muttered to himself, "What a weird guy. Probably some tech nerd." He wasn't proud of the comment, but it was true. Dave had been dealing with so much stress that even the smallest inconvenience felt like a personal affront. He figured he'd say something snarky and get it off his chest, but the stranger didn't flinch, didn't even glance at Dave. His gaze remained straight ahead, his expression unreadable. The longer they sat in silence, the more uneasy Dave became. There was something about the man that felt off, not in a dangerous way, but in a way that made him feel like he was being watched. A few minutes passed before Dave, unable to contain his growing irritation, blurted out, "I swear, it's always these tech geeks who think they're so important. What's next, a private jet to Mars?" Dave snorted, half expecting the guy to react with some sort of defensive comeback, or at least a glare. But instead, the man just continued to stare ahead, unfazed. The flight attendant, who had been standing nearby, glanced over at them. Her polite smile faltered for a brief second before she quickly looked away. Dave wasn't sure if it was his imagination, but it seemed like she was doing her best to avoid eye contact. "All right, chill out," Dave muttered to himself, trying to brush off his growing discomfort. He settled back into his seat, arms crossed over his chest. He was done with the whole thing. There were far bigger issues waiting for him back home. But that feeling, that weird, inexplicable feeling that something wasn't quite right, stayed with him. Dave tried to focus on the in-flight movie to distract himself, but the unease wouldn't go away. He couldn't stop glancing at the man beside him, whose calm demeanor only seemed to make Dave feel more irritated. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached cruising altitude. Please sit back and relax. We also have a special guest on board with us today. We'd like to thank him for his time and the contributions he's made in the world of technology." The words hit Dave like a ton of bricks. "Wait a minute," he muttered, trying to process what he just heard. A special guest? Was he? And then it hit him. His stomach dropped as he stared at the man beside him. It wasn't possible. There was no way. Was it? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Dave had always prided himself on being the guy who had everything under control. He wasn't the life of the party, but he got by. He had a steady job as a marketing manager at a mid-level company, a job that paid the bills but never excited him. His career had been on autopilot for years, neither soaring nor sinking, just floating along. At 42, Dave thought he had figured out life. Or at least, that's what he kept telling himself. But deep down, he knew something was missing. When he was younger, Dave had dreams, big ones. He'd wanted to be an entrepreneur, to create something that would leave a lasting mark on the world. He had a fire in him back then, a belief that anything was possible if he worked hard enough. But somewhere along the way, that fire had dimmed. He'd gotten distracted by the grind of daily life. The pressures of work, the unending cycle of meetings and presentations, had become his reality. His personal life had taken a back seat, too. He'd been married once, but that ended in divorce 5 years ago. There was no real bitterness between him and his ex, but the breakup had left a hole that Dave had never quite filled. Now, as he sat on that plane, heading toward yet another business trip he didn't care about, Dave wondered where it had all gone wrong. Was this really it? Was this the life he'd been working toward? A never-ending string of flights, mundane meetings, and brief encounters with people who didn't know him, and whose names he would forget the moment he left the room. It didn't help that his friends, the few he had left, didn't seem to understand. They were all content with their own routines, their own lives. They'd tell him to stick with what you know and play it safe. Dave had always known they were right. After all, who wanted to take risks when everything was going just okay? But deep inside, Dave was restless. He hated the feeling of being stuck. He hated the idea that he might be wasting his potential. He wasn't even sure if he could define what he was looking for anymore. It wasn't just success or money. It was more like freedom. The kind of freedom that came with making bold choices, with stepping into the unknown. As the plane continued its steady climb into the clouds, Dave's thoughts drifted to the man beside him. The odd, quiet man who had piqued his curiosity. The man who, for some reason, seemed to spark something in him. Maybe it was the calmness with which he carried himself, or the fact that he seemed like he belonged to another world, a world of tech and innovation where the rules of the ordinary didn't apply. It made Dave wonder if he, too, could somehow break free from the monotony of his life. But Dave didn't like uncertainty. It made him uncomfortable. He was a man of routine, and the thought of stepping outside of that felt risky. He glanced out the window, staring at the endless expanse of blue sky, and wondered, what would it take to truly change his life? Was he brave enough to make a leap, or was he destined to live a life of what-ifs? As if on cue, the man beside him stirred. He adjusted his position in his seat and, for the first time, looked at Dave. "Can't help but notice you've been glancing at me," the man said, his voice low but clear. His eyes were intense, almost penetrating, but there was a calmness about him that made Dave feel exposed. I didn't mean to stare," Dave stammered, feeling a bit caught off guard. The man chuckled softly, a sound that didn't seem to match the intensity in his eyes. "It's all right. People are curious. Just something on your mind?" For a moment, Dave was tempted to shrug it off, to go back to his own thoughts. But something about the man's demeanor made him pause. Maybe it was the fact that he hadn't flinched when Dave made the comment earlier. Maybe it was his confidence. "I don't know," Dave said, feeling a sudden honesty come over him. "I'm just stuck, I guess. Life's fine, but it's not really anything." The man raised an eyebrow. "Stuck? Huh? What's that feel like?" Dave wasn't used to being this open with strangers, especially with someone who was clearly so different from him. But there was something in the man's gaze that made Dave feel like he could tell the truth. "Like I'm doing the same thing every day. Working a job I don't love, going through the motions. I keep thinking there's more to life, but I don't know what that more is." The man nodded, as if he understood perfectly. "I get it. Life can feel like that sometimes. But maybe you're looking in the wrong places." Dave blinked. "What do you mean?" "Sometimes," the man said, "we get so wrapped up in the routine that we forget the big picture. We forget we're not just here to survive, but to live, to create, to take risks, even if it means failing. Because the real failure is never trying." There was a weight in his words, something Dave hadn't heard in a long time. It wasn't just motivational talk, it was genuine. Before Dave could respond, the flight attendant walked by, offering drinks. The man turned away, and the moment was broken. Dave sat in silence, the wheels turning in his head. Could he be right? Was he living his life in a way that kept him trapped? How could he possibly take a risk when everything he had was built on security? But even as he wondered, a nagging feeling persisted in the back of his mind. What if this man was trying to tell him something important? The flight passed by in a blur. Dave tried to focus on the in-flight movie, but his mind kept wandering back to the strange conversation he'd had with the man sitting next to him. His words echoed in Dave's mind, "The real failure is never trying." It wasn't the kind of thing someone said lightly. It made Dave uneasy, as though the stranger had uncovered something deep inside him that he wasn't ready to face. The man, who had introduced himself simply as John, didn't seem like a typical passenger. He was calm, collected, and almost unnervingly composed for someone sitting in coach class. As the plane cruised smoothly through the sky, John had continued to sit in silence for the most part, but every now and then, he'd glance at Dave with those steady, piercing eyes. It was as though he was silently judging Dave's every move. Not in an aggressive way, but in a way that made Dave feel like there was something more to this guy than met the eye. Dave's initial irritation had faded into curiosity. Was he just overthinking everything? The comment he made earlier, the conversation about being stuck, maybe it had all been a coincidence. But why did it feel so significant? John didn't look like someone who had the weight of the world on his shoulders. His unassuming appearance made him blend into the crowd, but there was an air of mystery about him. He wore a simple black hoodie and dark jeans, the kind of outfit anyone could wear. His hair was a bit messy, but it gave him an almost effortless charm, as though he didn't care what others thought about him. And yet, despite his casual demeanor, there was something undeniably magnetic about him. Dave couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this man than he was letting on. Every time he glanced at him, John was reading something on his tablet or staring out the window, but Dave could see the faint glimmer of concentration behind his eyes. It was like he was watching something beyond the plane, something far more important than the scenery outside. Suddenly, as the plane began its descent, Dave found himself searching for answers, his curiosity getting the better of him. He pulled out his phone and started typing John into the search bar. His fingers hesitated for a moment. What was he even looking for? A random guy on a flight? What could possibly come up? But there was something about this encounter that made Dave feel like it was more than just another mundane flight. Something told him that the stranger sitting next to him wasn't just some random passenger. As he scrolled through the results, Dave's eyes landed on an article. The title read, Elon Musk, the visionary behind SpaceX and Tesla. Dave blinked. He hadn't read anything about Musk recently, but the name stood out. Could it be the same guy? Without thinking, Dave clicked on the article. It showed a picture of Musk in a casual hoodie, his face partially obscured by a pair of dark sunglasses. As Dave scrolled through the article, he read about Musk's incredible ventures with SpaceX, Tesla, and Neuralink. He couldn't help but feel a twinge of recognition. The picture in the article and the man sitting next to him looked strikingly similar. The more Dave stared at the screen, the more his suspicions grew. Could the man sitting next to him really be Elon Musk? It seemed absurd. After all, why would Musk, one of the most famous and influential people in the world, be flying coach? Why wouldn't he be in a private jet, or at least first class? As the plane began its descent into the airport, Dave felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. He glanced over at John again, trying to get a better look, but the man had closed his tablet and was now staring out the window. The relaxed expression on his face made it hard to imagine that he could possibly be someone of Musk's stature. But Dave couldn't shake the uncanny similarities. Before he could dwell on it too much, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. We've begun our descent into city, folks. Please make sure your seatbelt is fastened and your tray tables are stowed. We'll be landing shortly. The plane lurched downward as it began its final approach, but Dave's mind was still racing. The thought that the man sitting beside him might be Elon Musk, a man who had changed the world with his innovations, seemed too surreal to believe. Still, there was something about the way John carried himself, the way people around him treated him, that suggested there was more to him than he let on. The flight attendants seemed to be overly respectful when they interacted with him. One of them had even mentioned a special guest during the in-flight announcement, but Dave had dismissed it at the time. Could that have been a hint? Just then, Dave caught the flight attendant's eye again as she walked by. She offered him a polite smile but looked quickly away, almost as if she was trying to avoid making eye contact. "Are you all right, sir?" she asked, her voice a bit too forced. "Yeah, fine," Dave replied quickly, but he couldn't help but feel that she was acting strangely. As the plane touched down and the seatbelt sign went off, John stood up, grabbed his backpack, and started to make his way toward the front of the cabin. Dave's heart skipped a beat. Was he about to find out the truth? Without thinking, he grabbed his own bag and followed behind, keeping a safe distance but trying to get a closer look. As John reached the front, he turned and smiled at Dave for the first time since the flight began. "Take care, man," he said, his voice smooth and warm, but there was an underlying sense of finality in his tone. Dave froze. There was something in that smile, something in the way he spoke that sent a chill down Dave's spine. Was it possible? "Wait," Dave blurted out before he could stop himself. "Are you Elon Musk?" John's expression softened, but he didn't seem surprised by the question. Instead, he simply said, "I go by many names, but yeah, that's me." Dave felt his stomach drop. His mind struggled to process what he just heard. Elon Musk, sitting next to him on a plane, for the entire flight. And it was then, as he looked at Musk, this genius, this innovator, this world-changing figure, that Dave's earlier words echoed in his mind. The real failure is never trying. Dave's heart raced as he stood there, frozen in disbelief. Elon Musk, the man who had reshaped the world with SpaceX, Tesla, and his countless other groundbreaking ventures. The man who had once been just a name on a screen, a larger-than-life figure whose genius had turned him into a household name. And here he was, standing right in front of Dave, casually smiling like it was no big deal. For a moment, everything around Dave seemed to blur. He tried to gather his thoughts, but his mind felt like it was spinning. What had just happened? Was this a joke? Could this really be happening? The man who had been sitting next to him for the past few hours, the man who'd spoken to him so calmly and imparted his cryptic wisdom about trying and taking risks, was none other than Elon Musk. The same Musk who had become a symbol of innovation, risk-taking, and boundless ambition. "John." "No, Elon," gave Dave a knowing look. "I know this is a lot to process, but yes, it's me." Dave's brain felt like it had short-circuited. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. What was he supposed to say? Should he ask for an autograph? Should he apologize for his earlier comment about tech geeks? The sheer absurdity of the situation was overwhelming. Elon chuckled softly, seemingly enjoying Dave's stunned silence. "Don't worry, I get it. Most people don't expect to meet me like this. I've been trying to live a little more under the radar lately, and this is one way to do it." Dave finally managed to find his voice, though it came out in a disbelieving whisper. Why were you sitting in coach? I mean, shouldn't you be in first class or a private jet?" Elon's smile widened, and for the first time, Dave saw a flash of something that looked almost mischievous. "You'd be surprised how much you learn by sitting in the middle of regular folks. People are different up here. You get a chance to hear things and see things you might not normally notice." It was then that Dave began to realize that there was more to this encounter than just a random celebrity sighting. Elon wasn't here because he had to be. He was here because he wanted to be. He wanted to experience the world from a different perspective. But why? Dave asked, still trying to grasp the enormity of the situation. "Why do you do it? Why go through all the trouble of trying to live like a normal person?" Elon shrugged nonchalantly, but there was a depth in his eyes that suggested he'd thought about this a lot. "Because, Dave, sometimes it's easy to forget where you came from when you're constantly surrounded by people who want something from you. You start to lose touch with what really matters, the small things, the real conversations. You get stuck in the echo chamber of your own success. And that's dangerous." Dave felt a strange twinge in his chest. Elon wasn't talking about technology or business or billion-dollar ventures. He was talking about something far deeper. He was talking about life, about purpose. "I don't understand," Dave admitted, the vulnerability in his voice unmistakable. "I mean, you've got everything. You're changing the world. What do you need to remember?" Elon's expression softened. He paused for a moment, as if contemplating how much he wanted to share with a complete stranger. "Even with all the success, all the wealth, all the power, I still question whether I'm truly living the life I want to live. It's easy to get swept up in the machine and forget that what matters most is the journey, not the destination." Dave felt a chill run down his spine. The words echoed in his mind, resonating deeply. Here he was, sitting next to the person who had transformed industries, revolutionized space travel, and pushed humanity to the edge of the impossible. And yet, Elon Musk, the visionary, seemed just as uncertain about life as Dave was. Elon continued, "You know, you're not the first person to feel stuck. I've been there. We all have, at some point. But the key is in how we react to it, how we break free from it." Dave's stomach tightened. The way Elon spoke was different from anyone he'd ever heard. He wasn't just dispensing advice. He was speaking from a place of experience, of real struggle, not just theory. "Listen, Dave," Elon said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "The world isn't going to wait for you, and neither should you. If you don't take a risk, if you don't make a move, you're just going to keep spinning your wheels, and you'll wake up one day and realize you've wasted your life." It's happened to a lot of people. The bluntness of it hit Dave hard. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, feeling the weight of Elon's words settle deep within him. Was he really just going through the motions, letting life slip by without truly living it? Had he been so focused on keeping things safe, so afraid of failure, that he had forgotten what it meant to dream? Before Dave could respond, the plane touched down with a gentle thud, signaling their arrival. The seatbelt sign clicked off, and passengers began to unbuckle, preparing to disembark. But Dave couldn't move. His mind was reeling, spinning with the intensity of the conversation. Elon gathered his things with practiced ease, standing up and adjusting his jacket. "If you're ever ready to break free from the cage you've built around yourself, let me know," he said, his voice quiet but firm. Dave watched him walk toward the exit, the crowd parting around him as though they could sense the presence of someone extraordinary. For a moment, Dave felt completely out of place, like he was caught in a dream. He had just spent the entire flight next to Elon Musk, and it had shaken him to his core. Dave stumbled out of the terminal, his mind still grappling with the surreal encounter he had just experienced. The world felt oddly distant, like he was moving in slow motion. The bustling crowd around him seemed to blur into the background, each person a fleeting figure, a bystander in the story of his life. It was hard to shake the feeling that everything had shifted, everything had changed, but he hadn't yet caught up to it. Elon Musk. The name repeated in Dave's head like a mantra, and he couldn't quite grasp the weight of it. What had just happened? He had asked a question, and Elon had responded with an answer so clear, so raw, it had left him standing in the middle of a crowded terminal like a man on the edge of an epiphany. "The real failure is never trying." The words reverberated within him, echoing in his mind like a warning bell. Dave's legs moved on autopilot, leading him toward the taxi line. But his thoughts were still trapped in that moment, trapped in the words of a man who had seemingly unlocked a truth about life that had eluded him for years. What was he supposed to do with that truth? As he slid into the back seat of the cab and gave the driver the address of his hotel, Dave's mind refused to quiet. The familiar hum of the city outside felt disconnected from the chaos in his mind. He wasn't even sure what he was going to do when he got to the hotel. All he knew was that he couldn't let this moment slip away. He couldn't just go back to the life he had before, not after meeting someone like Elon. He had been given a glimpse of something bigger, something that felt like a door had opened, and now it was up to him to walk through it. His phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking his trance. He pulled it out, expecting to see a text or a notification. But instead, there was an email from his boss. "Dave, I need you to be at the office bright and early tomorrow. We've got a major meeting scheduled, and your presentation is crucial. Don't be late." The words seemed to come from another world. He stared at the screen, trying to digest it. The meeting, the presentation, everything was exactly the same as it had always been. Another task, another checkbox to tick. And yet, in light of what had just happened, it felt utterly meaningless. It was as if the weight of his entire life's choices suddenly crashed into him all at once. He had built his career on small, incremental steps. He had followed the path of least resistance, always sticking to the safe option. But now, after hearing Elon speak with such conviction, the illusion of security seemed like a trap. He had been running on autopilot for so long that he had forgotten what it meant to truly take control of his life. The taxi pulled up to the hotel, and Dave stepped out, still lost in thought. As he made his way to the lobby, the familiar surroundings of the hotel, the check-in desk, the clean, sterile smell of the elevator, seemed almost suffocating. He didn't want to be here. Not now. Not after what he'd just learned. His mind raced as he unpacked his bag in his hotel room, but his thoughts were a tangled mess of doubt and hope. Was he ready to make a change? Could he really break free from the life he had built? Or was he just a prisoner of his own choices? The fear of failure gnawed at him, but there was something else too, something stronger. The desire to take a leap, to do something, anything, that would make him feel alive again. He needed to talk to someone. He needed advice, direction. And then, as if by fate, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from an old friend, Tim. "Hey man, been a while. Let's catch up soon. You free for a drink tonight?" Tim, his college buddy, the one person who had always encouraged him to take risks. Tim was a bit of a free spirit, someone who had never been content with just following the rules. He'd started a small business a few years ago, and though it wasn't exactly a huge success, he had always been the type to go after what he wanted, no matter how crazy the idea seemed. Tim's message hit Dave like a lifeline. He quickly typed back, "Yeah, let's meet up. I need to talk to you about something." As he set the phone down, Dave couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency rising within him. Maybe talking to Tim would help him find some clarity. Or maybe it would push him further down a path he wasn't sure he was ready to take. But one thing was certain. His conversation with Elon had opened something in him, and he couldn't ignore it any longer. As he headed out the door to meet Tim, he realized something profound. The world had always been full of opportunities, but he had been too scared to see them. Now, with a new perspective and a renewed sense of purpose, he was ready to face whatever came next, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. He stepped into the cool night air, the city lights flickering around him like stars. For the first time in years, he felt alive. And he knew this was just the beginning. The bar was bustling with the usual Thursday night crowd, a mix of weary office workers and college students out for a drink. Dave arrived a few minutes early, his nerves buzzing with anticipation. He hadn't seen Tim in months, but he knew that if anyone could understand what he was going through, it was him. Tim had always been the kind of guy who thrived on uncertainty, who believed in seizing life's unpredictable moments. And right now, that's exactly what Dave needed. Someone who could help him make sense of everything that had happened. The door to the bar swung open, and in walked Tim, a grin spreading across his face as soon as he spotted Dave. He was wearing his usual laid-back outfit, a flannel shirt and worn jeans, his hair a bit messy in that way that made it look intentional. Tim had always had an air of someone who was effortlessly cool, someone who didn't let the world weigh him down. "Hey, man," Tim greeted, clapping Dave on the back with a force that nearly knocked the wind out of him. "It's been too long. What's going on in your world?" Dave managed to smile, but his mind was still racing with everything that had happened earlier. "A lot," he said, motioning toward the empty stools at the bar. I need to talk to you about something." They ordered their drinks, and as the bartender slid them across the counter, Dave took a long sip, trying to steady his thoughts. This was it. This was the moment when he had to open up, to admit that something had changed inside him. Tim raised an eyebrow. "You've got that look in your eyes. What's on your mind?" Dave hesitated for a moment, then blurted it out. "I met Elon Musk today. Like, the Elon Musk. On a flight." Tim blinked, his grin faltering for just a second. "Wait, hold on. You met him? Like, for real?" Dave nodded, his heart still racing from the memory of the conversation. "Yeah, he was sitting right next to me. We talked for hours, and honestly, I've been thinking about it nonstop since." Tim leaned in, his curiosity piqued. "Okay, this is getting interesting. What did he say to you?" Dave took a deep breath, trying to summarize the whirlwind of emotions and revelations he'd experienced. "It's like, he made me realize something. I've been stuck, Tim. I've been so caught up in doing the safe thing, in following this boring, predictable path, and now, I don't know what to do with myself. Everything feels like it's suddenly up in the air, and I'm not sure if I'm ready to catch it." Tim nodded slowly, processing Dave's words. "You know, I get it. I really do. But you're not the only one who feels stuck. Hell, I feel that way sometimes, too. I've done the whole safe thing, worked for the corporate machine, stuck to what's expected. But you know what? I realized I'd rather take risks and fail than live my whole life just playing it safe." That's what living is about, Dave. The chance to fail, the chance to try something new. If you don't take that chance, what are you left with? Dave stared into his drink, the amber liquid swirling as he turned the glass between his fingers. Tim's words echoed in his mind, but the fear still lingered. Could he really take a leap like that? Could he walk away from everything he had built, the stability he had worked so hard to secure? Tim, Dave said, his voice lower now. What if I mess up? What if everything falls apart? What if I end up with nothing? Tim leaned back in his chair, studying him for a moment, before responding with a calm, almost philosophical tone. You don't know unless you try. Look, life doesn't come with guarantees. I can't tell you that everything will be fine. Hell, I can't even tell you that I've got it all figured out. But I can tell you this. No matter what happens, you'll be in a better place for trying. You'll learn, you'll grow, and you'll be a hell of a lot happier than if you just keep going down the same old road. Dave felt his chest tighten. It was as if a weight had been lifted, even if just a little bit. Tim wasn't offering easy answers, but he was offering something far more valuable, permission to step into the unknown, to embrace uncertainty. Yeah, Dave said slowly, the words coming more easily now. I think I get it. I need to make a change. Tim's face lit up with a grin. That's the spirit. And don't worry about messing up. You'll be fine. You've got the guts to do this. I can see it in you. Don't let fear hold you back. Dave nodded, feeling a surge of something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. A glimmer of possibility. It was a strange feeling, but it felt right. As if the weight of the world had shifted and now, for the first time in a long time, he was ready to move forward. They clinked their glasses together in a toast, and for a moment, Dave allowed himself to believe it. He could change. He could break free from the monotony. He could start living the life he'd always imagined. But there was still one thing he had to confront. One last obstacle that stood in his way. Himself. The conversation drifted to lighter topics as the night went on. But in the back of Dave's mind, he kept returning to one thought. What's the next step? It was a question that loomed larger than any decision he had made before. But for the first time, it didn't feel like an insurmountable challenge. Instead, it felt like the beginning of something. The first step on a journey that could change everything. The days following his conversation with Tim felt like a blur. Dave returned to his hotel that night with a new sense of purpose, but the pressure of actually taking the steps to change his life loomed heavily over him. He couldn't help but replay the conversation over and over in his head. You'll be in a better place for trying. Tim's words echoed in his mind like a mantra, but it didn't make the fear of taking that leap any less real. He spent the following days in a haze, going through the motions of meetings and presentations at the office, but his thoughts were elsewhere. The ordinary life he had been living felt increasingly distant, like a pair of shoes that no longer fit. He was no longer content to just play it safe, but the question remained, what now? Every decision he made felt weighted. A simple email seemed to carry the burden of a bigger choice, a step toward a future he couldn't quite picture yet. Each time he sat down at his desk, the words from Elon Musk's conversation, the ones about taking risks, embracing failure, pushed him forward, but he found himself stuck in the same cycle of indecision. Was he really ready to change? Was it really the right time? It wasn't until an email from his boss landed in his inbox, a request for another round of endless revisions on a project Dave had long lost interest in, that he finally snapped. The frustration he had been holding in for weeks bubbled to the surface. He couldn't keep doing this. He couldn't keep chasing approval for work that didn't inspire him, work that didn't fuel the fire inside of him. Dave stood up from his desk, the email still open on his screen. His hands shook, but he knew what he had to do. He had to take that first step. The email could wait. I'm done with this, he whispered to himself, more to hear the words than to convince anyone else. With determination flooding his veins, he grabbed his phone and dialed the number he had been avoiding for days. His boss, Karen. She picked up on the second ring, her voice as crisp and businesslike as ever. Hello? Karen, it's Dave, he said, trying to sound confident despite the storm swirling in his chest. I need to talk. There was a brief pause before she responded. What's going on? You sound different. I am different, Dave replied, pacing the length of his office, his breath coming a little faster now. Look, I can't keep doing this. I've been stuck in a job I don't care about, doing work that doesn't excite me. I'm not happy, Karen. I'm not going to keep pretending that I am. He heard her exhale through the phone. Dave, I don't think you're thinking this through. You've got a solid career here. You're going places. This job is secure. You'll have a future here. Dave felt his chest tighten at her words. He had heard this all before. The promises of stability, the comfort of knowing exactly where each day would take him. But he wasn't living for security anymore. No, Karen, Dave replied, his voice stronger now. I don't want that future anymore. I need to do something that makes me feel alive. I need to take a risk. There was a long silence on the other end, and for a moment, Dave thought she might hang up on him. But then, in a tone softer than he'd expected, Karen spoke again. Dave, are you sure about this? He could hear the concern in her voice, the same concern he had once felt for himself. But it didn't matter anymore. This was his choice, and he wasn't turning back. I'm sure, he said. I'm done. With that, he ended the call, and for the first time in years, Dave felt a strange sense of relief wash over him. It was done. He had made the decision, and he wasn't looking back. The next few days were a whirlwind. Dave packed up his things at the office, said his goodbyes, and made plans for his next steps. There was an undeniable sense of excitement, but also a deep unease. What would happen next? Where would this road take him? He didn't know, and for the first time in his life, that was okay. Dave took a few days to reflect and recharge. He spent time reconnecting with friends, going for long walks, and thinking about what really mattered to him. It wasn't about money or career anymore. It was about purpose. It was about finding something he was passionate about, something that would make him feel like he was truly living. He spent hours researching new career paths, reading books on entrepreneurship, and brainstorming ideas for a business he could start. It was overwhelming, but it was also exhilarating. He realized that there were endless possibilities before him, and the only thing standing in his way was himself. Then, one evening, as he sat down at his desk to go over his ideas once more, his phone rang. The caller ID read, Tim. Dave smiled to himself. Hey man, what's up? Dave answered, You good? Tim's voice was familiar and comforting, like it always had been. I'm good, Dave replied, trying to contain his excitement. I did it. I quit my job. Whoa, no going back now, huh? Tim laughed. I'm proud of you, man. You've got the guts to do it. So, what's next? Dave hesitated for a moment, his mind buzzing with possibilities. I don't know yet, but I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to build something that matters. Hell yeah, you are, Tim said, a genuine enthusiasm in his voice. You've got this. I know you do. Dave hung up the phone feeling like he had just taken a leap of faith into a vast, unknown world. He had no idea what was ahead, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. And so, the next chapter of Dave's journey began, not with a clear map or a guarantee of success, but with the courage to take the first step into the unknown. The leap of faith had been made. It had only been a few days since Dave left his old life behind, but it already felt like a lifetime. The world, once so familiar and predictable, now seemed wide open. His apartment, which had always felt like just a place to sleep between grueling workdays, suddenly felt like a home. A home where he could dream, where he could plan the future he had always wanted but never dared to pursue. He had spent the last few days in a whirlwind of brainstorming and research. Ideas were coming fast and furious, some practical, some outrageous, and some he couldn't quite understand yet. He had always been good at finding patterns in things, but now, as he considered the endless possibilities, his mind raced in new directions. The uncertainty was exhilarating. Dave's phone buzzed again, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was Tim. Hey man, how's the freedom feeling? Dave smiled. It's different. It's weird, but good. I can't even begin to explain it. I bet, Tim replied. But listen, I know you're probably overwhelmed with ideas right now, but have you thought about how you're going to get started? That was the question, wasn't it? Dave had been focused so much on the big picture, the freedom of leaving his job, that he hadn't fully processed what the actual next steps were. What did it take to start something from scratch? What if he failed? What if he fell flat on his face? I've got a lot of ideas, but honestly, I have no clue how to even begin. I'm not sure what comes next, Dave admitted, rubbing the back of his neck in frustration. Listen, you don't have to have it all figured out right now, but you can start small. Take one step at a time. Build something that you care about, something that excites you, and the rest will follow. Tim's words were simple but effective. Dave had spent years letting his fears dictate his actions. Now was the time to take action, one step at a time, no matter how daunting it seemed. It was time to focus on the small things, the baby steps that would eventually lead to bigger leaps. Dave put down his phone and started sketching out a plan. He had always been drawn to technology and innovation. He had always been a fan of Elon Musk's work. The way Musk seemed to approach the world with a sense of audacity and optimism that few others dared to match. What if he could build something that aligned with that same spirit? What if he could find a way to create something that wasn't just about making money, but about making a real difference? The idea hit him like a lightning bolt. Sustainability. The world was facing an environmental crisis, and there were countless ways to innovate and create positive change. He had always been passionate about the environment, and now, with the freedom to follow his passion, he wanted to contribute to that cause in a meaningful way. His plan began to take shape. He would start small, focusing on sustainable products and services. He knew it would take time. He didn't have the connections or the expertise that some of the big players in the industry had. But what he did have was passion, determination, and a willingness to learn. Over the next few weeks, Dave threw himself into his new project. He researched everything he could about sustainable practices and innovations. He reached out to people in the industry, trying to learn from them, asking for advice. Some were receptive, others not so much, but Dave didn't let that stop him. He was used to rejection. It was part of the process, part of the journey. But with every no came a new lesson, and with every lesson, Dave grew more confident in his ability to build something meaningful. He started small, focusing on local markets, testing out his ideas, refining them. The initial success wasn't spectacular. His first product launch didn't bring in millions, but it wasn't a failure either. It was a sign that he was on the right track. As he continued to push forward, Dave began to see the bigger picture. Every day, he felt himself growing stronger, more capable, more confident. He was no longer that man stuck in a corporate job, waiting for the next day to pass. He was a creator, an innovator, someone who was actively shaping his future. And then, one day, a breakthrough came. One of his products, a line of eco-friendly, reusable goods, began to gain traction on social media. People were excited about it. They were passionate about it. His little startup, which had once seemed like a pipe dream, was starting to pick up momentum. As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Dave's business continued to grow. He expanded his product line, reached new markets, and, for the first time, saw the impact he was making. But it wasn't just the success that mattered. It was the journey. The way he had grown as a person, the lessons he had learned, the relationships he had built. It all came together in a way that made him feel alive in a way he had never experienced before. And yet, there were moments when doubts still crept in. Times when things didn't go according to plan, when the road seemed too hard to navigate. But now, with everything he had learned, Dave faced those challenges head-on. He embraced failure as a part of the process, knowing that it wasn't the end, but a stepping stone to something greater. One evening, as he sat at his desk, reviewing his progress, he received a call. The caller ID read, Elon Musk. His heart skipped a beat. He had never expected this moment to come, but there it was. The very man who had inspired this journey, the one whose words had planted the seed for this entire transformation, was on the other end of the line. Dave, Elon's voice came through the phone, clear and calm. I've been following your progress. You're doing great things. Dave was speechless. This was the moment he had dreamed of, the moment when everything had come full circle. Thank you, Elon, Dave managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. You helped me realize that I had the power to change my life. I can't even put into words what this means to me. Elon chuckled. Well, you're doing it. That's what matters. Keep pushing. Don't stop. And just like that, Dave knew he had made the right decision. He had stepped into the unknown, faced his fears, and created something he was proud of. The journey wasn't easy, and it still wasn't over. But he was on the right path, a path he had carved for himself. As weeks turned into months, Dave's business began to take shape in a way he never thought possible. The small eco-friendly product line he had launched gained attention not just from local communities, but from influential social media influencers and even eco-conscious celebrities. His inbox was flooded with messages from customers and collaborators. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, but even with the momentum, Dave's journey wasn't without its challenges. The first test came in the form of a partnership proposal. An established distributor, one that had connections to large retail chains, had reached out to Dave. They wanted to carry his products in their stores. It was a huge opportunity, a chance to elevate his business to a national level, but it came with a hefty price tag. The distributor wanted a sizable portion of the profits in exchange for access to their network. They also demanded a commitment to scale rapidly, something that made Dave uneasy. The last thing he wanted was to lose control of his company, the thing he'd worked so hard to build. Don't let the money cloud your judgment, Tim had warned during one of their many catch-ups. Remember why you started. It's not about chasing the biggest deal. It's about staying true to what you believe in. If the deal doesn't sit right with you, don't take it. The advice was clear, but the temptation of taking his business to the next level was almost overwhelming. Dave could see the potential. He could imagine his products lining the shelves of big-name stores, spreading his message of sustainability to millions. But something about the deal didn't sit right with him. He wasn't sure if the distributor's offer aligned with his vision. Take your time, Tim had said. You've got time to figure this out. Don't rush it. It's your company, your call. So, Dave pushed the decision back for the time being, choosing instead to focus on scaling his business organically, ensuring that everything he created was aligned with his core values. Then came the next hurdle. A few months into the expansion, Dave started facing supply chain problems. His initial suppliers couldn't keep up with the increasing demand. Materials were delayed, shipments were stuck in transit, and his customers, many of whom had been waiting eagerly for new products, were starting to complain. Dave felt the pressure mount. The excitement of growing his business had quickly turned into a whirlwind of logistics nightmares. He was working longer hours, trying to find new suppliers and keep customers happy. His mind, once clear and full of ideas, now felt clouded by constant anxiety. Maybe I should have taken the deal, he thought late one night, staring at his phone screen, which was filled with a long list of unresolved issues. Maybe I could have avoided all of this if I just scaled faster. But deep down, he knew that wasn't the answer. Scaling too fast could have led to disaster. Dave had to remember the core reason he started this journey: to create something meaningful and sustainable, not just to grow for the sake of growth. As the months went by, Dave found his footing. He worked tirelessly to find better suppliers, to streamline his production process, and to better manage his inventory. His efforts paid off. Slowly but surely, his business regained its balance. The tension between expansion and quality, between the desire for success and the need for authenticity, had pushed Dave to his limits. But it had also made him realize something incredibly important. Growth had to be sustainable, both for his company and for him as an individual. Despite the challenges, Dave remained focused on his goal: to create a business that stood for something more than just profit. He wanted to prove that you didn't have to sacrifice your values for success. And though the struggle was real, the passion behind his mission kept him going. Then came the news that made his heart drop. One of his competitors, a much larger company, had launched a line of eco-friendly products. They had the resources to market it on a massive scale, and the backlash came fast. The media, once praising Dave's brand for its authenticity and commitment to the environment, now began to question whether his company could compete with the industry giant. People started comparing his brand to the bigger players, accusing Dave of not being innovative enough, and wondering if his small-scale efforts were enough to make a real impact. Dave spent days drowning in the negativity. There were online articles dissecting every decision he had made. Social media influencers, once supportive, started promoting his competitors' products instead. It felt like everything he had worked for was slipping away. The road to success was never supposed to be this hard. He confided in Tim. "I'm not sure I can do this, Tim," Dave said, his voice heavy. It feels like the world is turning against me. I'm just not big enough to compete with these guys. Tim's response was simple but unwavering. Dave, this isn't about size. It's about impact. Your customers know what you stand for. You've built something real. Don't let the noise drown that out. But Dave was struggling to keep his focus. His confidence, once unshakable, now felt fragile. The constant comparison to the larger companies wore on him. The pressure to prove that his business mattered seemed endless. Would people even care about his products if they had the choice between him and a well-funded giant? You need to stay true to your vision, Tim continued, his voice calm but firm. This is your moment to dig deep. Everyone has doubts. The giants have their advantages, but you've got something they'll never have, a real, authentic story. Stick with it, man. Those words were a lifeline. Tim was right. Dave had to remember why he started. He couldn't control what the big players did, but he could control how he responded, how he continued to shape his company. The road was rocky, but that was part of the journey. It was time for him to stop doubting his worth and push forward with even more determination than before. The next day, Dave sat down and made a choice. He would stop trying to fight the bigger companies on their terms. Instead, he would lean into what made his brand unique. He would focus on his community, build deeper relationships with his customers, and double down on his commitment to sustainability. The climb was still steep, but Dave was more determined than ever. The battle with doubt wasn't over, but he had learned to embrace it. Failure, he realized, wasn't the end. It was a lesson, a necessary part of growth. And now, more than ever, he was ready to keep climbing. Weeks passed, and Dave's resolve continued to be tested. He had doubled down on his mission to build an authentic, sustainable business, but the obstacles never seemed to stop coming. Each day felt like a new challenge, and while his business was steadily growing, it was still far from the level of success he had once envisioned when he first started this journey. But everything changed the day he received a call from an unexpected source. It was mid-afternoon, and Dave had just finished a meeting with a new supplier when his phone rang. The caller ID read, Elon Musk. His heart skipped a beat. Dave had kept his number in his contacts, though he had never expected Elon to actually reach out again. He had assumed that the brief conversation a few months ago had been a fluke, an encouraging pat on the back from someone who didn't really know him. But now, as the phone rang, he realized just how much that moment had meant to him. And maybe, just maybe, this call was a sign that he was still on the right path. Hello? Dave answered, his voice tight with a mix of excitement and nerves. Dave, it's Elon, came the familiar voice on the other end. I've been watching your progress. I know you've been through a lot, but I'm reaching out because I believe you're on the verge of something big. Dave's stomach twisted with anticipation. What could this mean? Was he about to get an offer from Elon's network? Was he about to be catapulted into the spotlight in a way he hadn't imagined? What's going on? Dave asked, trying to sound calm, though he could feel his heart pounding in his chest. I've been seeing a lot of traction with your business lately. More people are talking about you and your products, Elon continued. I've been talking to some of my partners, and they're interested in backing you. They see the potential, and they believe in what you're doing. It's rare to find someone who's not just chasing profit, but is actually committed to making the world a better place. They want to help you take things to the next level. Dave couldn't believe what he was hearing. This wasn't just another industry connection or a nice gesture from a philanthropist. It was an opportunity to expand, to turn his small business into something that could make a massive difference. The kind of change he had dreamed of when he first left his corporate job. His passion and perseverance were about to be recognized in a way he had never imagined. But as the excitement surged through him, a familiar feeling crept in. The same doubt that had clouded his mind during the tough moments of the past months came rushing back. Was he ready for this? Was he capable of handling the responsibility that would come with such a huge leap forward? Elon's voice pulled him out of his thoughts. Look, I'm not saying it's going to be easy. The road ahead is going to be even harder than what you've faced so far. You'll have to keep pushing, keep believing in your vision, but I think you're ready. You've got something unique, Dave. You're not in this just for the money. You've built a company that people believe in, and with the right resources, there's no telling how far you can take it. The words hit him like a lightning bolt. Elon Musk wasn't just offering support. He was giving Dave the validation he had been craving, the confirmation that he was on the right path. Dave's heart raced as he processed everything Elon was saying. This wasn't just an opportunity. It was the culmination of everything he had worked for. "I don't know what to say," Dave said, his voice shaking. "This is huge. I'm honored, but I also feel like I have so much more to learn. How do I even know if I'm ready for all of this?" Elon's response was calm and reassuring. "You'll never feel fully ready. That's the thing about success. It's not about having everything figured out. It's about taking the leap, learning along the way, and trusting that your vision will guide you. There will always be uncertainty, but you've got the right mindset. Trust yourself, Dave." Dave felt a flood of emotions: excitement, fear, gratitude, and disbelief. The person who had inspired him to take his first steps on this journey, who had given him the courage to leave his old life behind, was now telling him that he was capable of achieving something even bigger. "Okay," Dave said, a new sense of clarity settling over him. "I'm in." There was a brief pause on the line, and then Elon spoke again. "Great. I'll have my team reach out to you soon to discuss the next steps. Don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything. But remember, it's not about the money or the fame. It's about the impact you can make. Keep that in mind, always." Dave ended the call feeling a rush of adrenaline. It felt like the universe had just opened a new door for him. His dream wasn't just a dream anymore. It was becoming a reality. Over the next few days, things moved quickly. Elon's team set up a meeting with potential investors, people who shared his commitment to sustainability and innovation. As the meetings unfolded, Dave realized that the weight of the decision ahead was even greater than he had imagined. These were people who could help him scale his business beyond anything he had ever thought possible. The resources they offered could help him take his products to new heights and reach a global audience. But with this opportunity came a massive responsibility. If he accepted their help, he would be tied to a group of investors, each with their own vision and agenda. Would his values be compromised in the name of success? Would he be able to maintain the integrity of his brand as it grew? That night, Dave sat in his apartment, alone with his thoughts. He thought back to the days when he had quit his corporate job, to the overwhelming uncertainty that had once paralyzed him. He thought about his first conversation with Tim, about the promises he had made to himself, that he would build a business that mattered, that he would stay true to his vision, no matter the cost. And in that quiet moment, Dave realized something profound. The road ahead was never going to be easy. There would always be challenges, always be moments when he felt unsure, but the choice was his. He could take this opportunity, scale his business, and make a bigger impact, while staying true to the values that had gotten him this far. Or he could back away and continue the slow, steady growth he had known up until now. But the question was clear. What was he really capable of? With a deep breath, Dave made his decision. The next day, he made the call to accept the offer. It was time to take the next step, to trust in himself and the journey he had started. There would be obstacles ahead, but he knew one thing for certain. He was ready to face them. The decision had been made. After days of deliberation, hours spent reflecting on his values, and conversations with people who believed in his mission, Dave finally accepted Elon Musk's offer. The next phase of his journey had begun. The weight of it all was still settling in, but Dave felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: confidence. As soon as the deal was confirmed, things moved at lightning speed. Elon's team connected him with industry experts, legal advisors, and a network of investors who had supported groundbreaking innovations in the past. They all shared one common thread: a commitment to sustainability and creating a lasting impact on the world. Dave felt like he was walking among giants, but there was a constant reminder in his mind that he was here because of his authenticity, his vision, and his hard work. These were people who saw potential in him, in his ideas, and in his ability to lead the charge in an industry that was desperate for change. The first major task was a large-scale product launch, one that would introduce his eco-friendly goods to a much larger market. It wasn't just about selling products anymore. This was about making a statement, about showing the world that sustainability didn't have to be a trend, it could be the future. The investors and advisors began to craft an ambitious marketing strategy. They wanted to make waves, to position Dave's company as not just another eco-brand, but as a global movement. "Let's create something people can't ignore," Elon said during one of the strategy meetings. "If we do this right, we're not just selling a product. We're starting a revolution." The stakes had never been higher. The next few weeks were a blur. Dave found himself overseeing every part of the launch. From refining the final product lines to meeting with the best marketing minds, it felt like every moment brought a new challenge. There were press conferences to attend, ads to approve, and logistics to manage. There were sleepless nights, long meetings, and endless planning. Yet, through it all, Dave never lost sight of the mission that had started it all: to make a real difference, to build something that didn't just profit from the environment, but protected it. The night before the official launch, Dave stood at the window of his apartment. The city lights below seemed to twinkle like stars, and for the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of peace. He thought back to the early days of his business, when it was just a small idea, a passion project. Now, it had grown into something much bigger, something that had the potential to change lives and the world. But with that change came immense pressure. His mind wandered to the what-ifs, the fear that he might fail, that this massive leap might end in disaster. He thought about all the people who had put their faith in him. What if he let them down? What if I'm not enough? He thought, a fleeting doubt creeping into his mind. But just as quickly as the thought arrived, he pushed it aside. He had already come so far. He had faced challenges that seemed insurmountable, only to rise above them. He had proven time and time again that he was capable of more than he ever believed. This was just another step in the journey, and no matter what happened, he had already succeeded. He had taken the leap. He had followed his passion, built something meaningful, and changed the course of his life. The next day, the world finally saw what Dave had been working on for months. The launch was a spectacle, one that was talked about for days to come. The media buzzed with excitement as the new eco-friendly line hit the market. But it wasn't just the products themselves that had people talking. It was the story behind them. A young entrepreneur who had dared to follow his passion, to take risks and fight against the corporate systems that had held him back for so long. A company built on authenticity, driven by a mission to save the planet. Dave's brand was no longer a small startup. It had become a movement, a symbol of change. Social media exploded with posts, hashtags, and influencers sharing their excitement about the products. Sales were through the roof, but more than that, it was the conversations that were happening around the launch that filled Dave with pride. People weren't just buying products, they were buying into a vision of a world where sustainability was no longer a luxury, but a necessity. Despite the overwhelming success, Dave knew this was just the beginning. The product launch was the first step in a much larger journey. The pressure to scale even further, to meet the demand that was pouring in from every corner of the world, was already mounting. But this time, Dave wasn't afraid. He had a team of experts backing him, a network of partners who shared his vision, and the confidence that came from knowing his purpose was clear. Still, as the weeks went by and the business continued to grow at an unprecedented rate, Dave found himself struggling with something he hadn't anticipated: the need for personal balance. In the early days of his startup, his life had revolved around his work. His passion was all-consuming. But now, as the company expanded, Dave realized just how much he had neglected his personal life. His friends, family, and relationships had taken a back seat to his ambition. And though the growth of his business was thrilling, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was missing. One evening, after a particularly intense round of meetings, Dave sat down with Tim. The two of them had become close friends throughout this journey, and Tim had been one of the few constants Dave could rely on. "You're doing great, Dave," Tim said, sipping his coffee. "But I can't help but notice how much you're pushing yourself. What's the point of all this if you're not enjoying the ride?" Dave leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. It was a question he had been avoiding for a while. He had been so focused on building the business, achieving success, that he had forgotten the importance of taking care of himself. The road ahead was still long, and while success was gratifying, it wasn't everything. "I don't know," Dave admitted. "I just got so caught up in the idea of changing the world, of proving myself. But now, with everything growing so fast, I'm starting to realize I don't want to lose everything else along the way. Tim gave him a knowing look. That's the thing, man. You can change the world without losing yourself in the process. Take a step back when you need it. Enjoy the wins. And remember, balance is part of the journey too. Dave nodded, grateful for Tim's perspective. He had built a business that mattered, but now, he needed to remember that life was about more than just work. It was about relationships, growth, and the simple moments that made it all worth it. The next morning, Dave took a walk around the city. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to just breathe. He didn't need to check his email or answer 100 questions. He just walked, taking in the world around him. He remembered why he started this journey in the first place, to live a life that mattered, to create a legacy of change. As the sun set over the city, Dave made a promise to himself. No matter how big the business became, he would never forget the most important thing of all, the balance between ambition and happiness, between success and fulfillment. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The buzz surrounding Dave's product launch was nothing short of a media frenzy. As his business continued to soar, with sales numbers climbing each day and customer feedback pouring in, it seemed like nothing could go wrong. Dave was on top of the world. His phone buzzed constantly with congratulations and offers for collaboration. Even the big tech giants started to take notice. However, the higher the mountain, the steeper the fall. And Dave was about to learn just how quickly things could change. One Monday morning, Dave walked into his office with a sense of optimism. The weekend had been quiet. He had taken Tim's advice and spent a couple of days unplugged, recharging and spending time with family. He felt ready for the week ahead. He had a new line of products he was eager to unveil, and the media interest was at an all-time high. But as soon as he stepped through the door, the atmosphere was tense. People were huddled in small groups, whispering behind closed doors. His COO, Sarah, approached him with a worried expression on her face. "Dave, we need to talk," she said, her voice strained. "What's going on?" Dave asked, his pulse quickening. "Everything okay?" Sarah hesitated, and Dave could sense that something was terribly wrong. She motioned for him to follow her into the conference room, where several other team members were already gathered. As Dave took a seat, his mind raced, trying to anticipate the worst. Had there been a major shipping error? Was there a problem with the product? His thoughts were interrupted when Sarah spoke again. "Dave," she began, "we've hit a major roadblock. A competitor has launched a very similar product, using almost identical packaging and marketing strategies. It's been getting a lot of traction, and the media has started comparing them to us." Dave felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean, almost identical?" "Let me show you," Sarah said, pulling up a presentation on the screen. She clicked through slides that showed images of the competitor's new product, side by side with his. The similarities were undeniable, right down to the color palette, the logo design, and even the messaging. They're not just copying us. They're trying to position themselves as the sustainable alternative in the market. And they've got big financial backing, Sarah continued. The media has picked up on it, and some of the influencers we've worked with have started to pivot towards them. They're using the same story: sustainability, eco-consciousness, innovation. Dave felt his stomach drop. This wasn't just a competitor. It was a company trying to hijack his brand and the message he had worked so hard to build. The thought of his business being overshadowed by a knockoff was a nightmare he hadn't prepared for. "This is bad," Dave said, his voice hoarse. "What's our plan?" "We're working on it," Sarah replied, "but we need to act fast. We can't afford to sit back and let them take over. We've got a lot invested in this, and we can't afford to lose the momentum." Dave sat back in his chair, trying to process everything. He had built this business from the ground up, pouring his heart and soul into every detail. The idea of someone ripping it off and gaining the traction he had fought so hard to build was unbearable. Yet, he knew one thing for sure: backing down was not an option. "I'm not giving up," Dave said, standing up and pacing the room. "We need to get ahead of this. We've worked too hard to let someone else steal our thunder." As the meeting continued, they discussed strategies to respond, revamping the branding, intensifying the marketing campaigns, and leaning into the authenticity of the business. But even as they brainstormed, Dave couldn't shake the feeling of unease. He had always prided himself on doing things the right way, on building a brand that was rooted in honesty and integrity. Now, he was faced with a situation that demanded a more aggressive approach, one that felt at odds with the values that had brought him this far. The next few days were a whirlwind. Dave's team worked tirelessly to rework the brand's messaging, focusing even more heavily on the story behind the company. How it wasn't just about selling a product but about changing the way people thought about sustainability. They launched a social media campaign that highlighted the authentic aspects of their brand, including the real people behind the product and the sacrifices they had made to create something meaningful. The hashtag #MoreThanSustainability quickly gained traction, and their loyal customer base rallied behind them. But as Dave threw himself into the battle for his business, something began to shift inside him. The constant pressure, the sleepless nights, the endless meetings, it was starting to take a toll. He found himself becoming increasingly irritable and disconnected from his team. His once solid work-life balance was disintegrating, and the stress was clouding his ability to think clearly. One evening, as he sat in his office long after everyone had gone home, Tim called. He could tell something was off just by the sound of Dave's voice. "Hey man, you good?" Tim asked. Dave leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. "I don't know, Tim. I'm trying to keep it together, but everything feels like it's falling apart. I thought I had everything under control, but now, I don't know if I'm cut out for this." Tim paused for a moment. "You've been through worse, Dave. This isn't the first challenge you've faced, but you've got to keep your head in the game. I know it feels overwhelming right now, but if anyone can fight through this, it's you. Just don't forget why you started this in the first place." Dave sighed, rubbing his temples. "I know, but it's different now. The stakes are so much higher. I'm responsible for so many people, and I can't let them down." "You're not alone in this," Tim said, his voice calm and reassuring. "You've got a whole team behind you. They believe in you. Don't forget that." Dave took a deep breath, letting the words sink in. The pressure had been mounting for weeks, but hearing Tim's voice reminded him of the most important thing he had forgotten in the chaos. He wasn't alone. This wasn't a battle he had to fight on his own. His team, his friends, and his mission were all part of the equation. And together, they could weather any storm. That night, Dave made a promise to himself. He would face the competitor head-on, not out of fear or desperation, but out of belief in the business he had created and the people who had supported him. This was just another challenge on the road to success, and he wasn't going to let it derail him. The storm was brewing, but Dave knew that as long as he stayed true to his vision, he would find a way to navigate it. The next few weeks felt like an emotional roller coaster for Dave. Every day was a battle against time and pressure. His team was working tirelessly to stay ahead of the competitor, but despite their best efforts, the tide seemed to be turning. Sales for the competitor's product were skyrocketing, largely fueled by their larger advertising budget and the media frenzy that had surrounded the launch. Dave's own brand was struggling to keep up, despite all the effort they were putting into their social media campaigns and influencer partnerships. The #MoreThanSustainability hashtag was gaining traction, but it didn't seem enough to push the needle. Every time Dave checked the news or social media, there was another headline comparing the two brands, usually with the competitor in a favorable light. It wasn't just the business that was weighing on him anymore. His personal life had started to unravel as well. He hadn't spoken to his family in days. His phone calls with Tim had become less frequent, as he had found himself buried in work and meetings. His friends were starting to notice that he was pulling away, his conversations more focused on strategy than on how he was feeling. He was becoming more isolated, trapped inside a cycle of relentless work, and the pressure was starting to affect his mental and emotional health. One night, after an exhausting round of meetings, Dave found himself standing alone on the balcony of his apartment, staring out over the city. The lights below flickered in the distance, and for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to think. Really think. Was this really what I wanted? He wondered. I've fought so hard to get here, but at what cost? The reality of the situation hit him hard. The pressure to succeed had become all-consuming, and in the process, he had lost sight of the very things that had motivated him in the first place. his passion for change, his purpose, and his connection to the people who had helped him along the way. Dave took a deep breath, but it didn't bring the sense of relief he had hoped for. Instead, it felt like the weight of everything pressing down on him all at once. The uncertainty, the constant comparisons, the fear that no matter how hard he tried, he might lose everything. And then, just as the wave of panic was about to engulf him, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Tim. "I know you're stressed, but you need to talk to someone. I'm here if you need to unload. Don't let it all implode inside." Dave stared at the message for a long moment. He felt the lump in his throat tighten as the flood of emotions he had been pushing away finally broke through. He quickly typed a reply, "Can I call you?" Minutes later, Dave was pacing around his apartment as Tim's voice came through the phone. "Hey man, what's going on?" "I don't know if I can do this anymore, Tim," Dave admitted, the words coming out in a rush. "I feel like everything is falling apart. The business, my personal life. I've been so focused on proving myself that I've lost sight of why I started this in the first place. I've pushed everyone away, and I can't even remember what it felt like to just breathe." Tim was silent for a moment before responding, his voice steady and calming. "You've been carrying this burden alone for far too long. You're not meant to do it by yourself, and you're not meant to give up either. But what you do need to do is take a step back. It's okay to admit that you're struggling." Dave's heart raced as the weight of Tim's words settled in. He had been so focused on not failing that he had forgotten the value of self-care, the importance of perspective. It wasn't just about his business. It was about the person he had become in the process. "But what if I fail? What if everything we've worked for just doesn't work out?" Dave's voice cracked as the doubt lingered in his words. "Failure isn't the end of the story," Tim said softly. "It's part of it. But you've already succeeded. Look at how far you've come, and look at the impact you're having. People believe in what you're doing. They don't believe in you just because of a product. They believe in you because of who you are and what you stand for. Don't lose sight of that." Dave leaned against the wall, his mind reeling. He had spent so much time chasing success, but in doing so, he had forgotten why he started in the first place. To make a difference, to create a lasting change, and to live a life that reflected his values. The business had grown, yes, but at what cost? Was the person he was becoming someone he could even recognize? As the conversation continued, Dave started to feel the fog in his mind begin to clear. Tim's words had reminded him of something crucial, that success wasn't just about the end result, but about the journey. And the journey, at its core, was about staying true to himself. When the call ended, Dave felt a sense of clarity. He didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time in weeks, he knew what he needed to do. He needed to reconnect with his team, his family, and his friends. He needed to reclaim the purpose behind his work and let go of the fear of failure that had been consuming him. The following morning, Dave called an all-hands meeting. His heart was pounding as he stood before his team, but this time, it wasn't the pressure of the competition or the product launch that filled his chest. It was a sense of resolve, of authenticity. "I've been carrying a lot of weight on my shoulders lately," Dave started, his voice shaky at first but growing stronger with each word. "And I realize now that I've lost sight of the most important thing, why we're here. We're not just selling products. We're trying to change the way people think about the world. And that mission hasn't changed, no matter what challenges we're facing." He paused, looking around the room at the people who had been there from the beginning, the ones who had believed in him when he had nothing. "I'm not going to pretend like I've got all the answers right now, but I'm not giving up. And I want all of you to know that I'm with you, every step of the way. We'll figure this out together." The room fell silent for a moment, and then, slowly, applause broke out. Dave felt a lump form in his throat, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from gratitude. His team was with him, as they always had been, and for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was part of something bigger than the stress of competition. He was part of a mission that was bigger than the product, bigger than the market, and bigger than his own doubts. This was his true purpose. The days after Dave's pivotal conversation with Tim marked a shift in the atmosphere around the office. The tension was still palpable, but there was a renewed sense of purpose in the air. Dave, no longer consumed by the overwhelming weight of fear, had rediscovered the spark that had driven him to start the company in the first place. He wasn't just focused on competing anymore. He was focused on fulfilling the mission that had inspired him. For the first time in weeks, Dave felt like he could breathe. He made an effort to reconnect with his team, not just as their leader, but as a person. He stopped hiding in his office, stopped shying away from difficult conversations. Instead, he spent time with everyone, listening to their ideas, their concerns, and their personal stories. He realized that the true strength of his company didn't come from flashy products or media coverage. It came from the passion and dedication of the people who were working alongside him. In one of his conversations with Sarah, his COO, he asked her about her thoughts on the competitor's rise. Instead of the usual cold, calculated response he was used to, she smiled softly and said, "They may have the budget, but we have heart. We've always had heart. We can't forget that." Dave nodded, feeling the weight of her words. Heart. That was the core of their brand. They weren't a faceless corporation. They were a group of people, bound together by a shared vision to change the world in their own way. In the weeks that followed, Dave and his team adjusted their approach. They doubled down on their authenticity, refusing to play the same game as the competitor. Rather than focusing on flashy ads or large-scale influencer campaigns, they launched a grassroots movement that put the people behind the company at the forefront. They shared their stories of personal sacrifices, challenges, and triumphs. The hashtag #MoreThanSustainability campaign was rebranded to include a powerful call to action. Change isn't just about the product. It's about the people who believe in it. They also worked hard to engage directly with their customers, giving them a voice in the development of future products. Instead of positioning themselves against the competitor, they focused on what made them unique: their commitment to authenticity, community, and sustainability. As they continued to build this new strategy, something remarkable began to happen. Slowly but surely, the tide started to turn in their favor. The media, once full of comparisons between the two companies, began to highlight the differences between them. The competitor's product might have had the larger marketing budget, but it lacked the personal touch that made Dave's company stand out. Sales began to pick up again, and their loyal customer base grew stronger. Social media was abuzz with stories from real customers who shared how the products had made a meaningful impact in their lives. People weren't just buying products. They were buying into the mission, into the community, and into the values that Dave's company represented. Dave also found himself reconnecting with his family. He made a conscious effort to balance work with personal time, realizing that his success wasn't just defined by his business accomplishments. It was about the relationships he built and the life he was living outside of work. One weekend, Dave took a trip with his wife, Emily, and their 2 kids to a cabin in the mountains, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. It was the first time in months that he felt truly present. No phone calls, no emails, just time with the people who mattered most. As they sat by the fire, roasting marshmallows and telling stories, Dave felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. It was in moments like this that he remembered why he had started this journey: to create a legacy that his children could be proud of, one that stood for something greater than just financial success. As he looked at his family, he realized that his success would mean nothing if he couldn't share it with the people he loved. Back at the office, things were looking brighter. The competitor, while still a formidable force in the market, had begun to lose its edge. People were starting to recognize the value of authenticity over hype, of true commitment over surface-level promises. Dave's company had not only survived the storm, it had weathered it and come out stronger on the other side. One evening, Dave stood in front of his team, feeling a sense of pride he hadn't felt in a long time. They had made it through one of the most challenging periods in the company's history, and they had done it by sticking together, staying true to their values, and believing in the mission they had set out to achieve. "We've been through a lot," Dave said, his voice steady, "but I want you all to know how much I appreciate everything you've done. You've shown me what it means to work together, to support each other, and to never lose sight of why we started this journey. I couldn't have asked for a better team." The room erupted into applause, and Dave's heart swelled with gratitude. He had always known that success wasn't just about the end result. It was about the people who helped you get there, the lessons you learned along the way, and the impact you made. As he left the office that night, he felt a deep sense of peace. The road had been long and difficult, but Dave had found his way back to what truly mattered. He had rediscovered his passion, reconnected with his purpose, and learned to trust in himself and his team. And in the end, that was the real success. As the months rolled on, Dave found that his business wasn't just recovering, it was thriving. Their revamped marketing strategy was resonating with customers, and their emphasis on authenticity was creating a loyal following. The competitor, despite its larger financial backing, began to lose its allure as customers started to gravitate toward brands that felt more real and grounded. The hashtag More Than Sustainability campaign had struck a chord with the audience, positioning Dave's company as more than just a product, but a movement. But even with success knocking at his door, Dave knew that the journey was far from over. There was still a challenge ahead of him that he hadn't anticipated, a challenge that would push him in ways he never imagined. It came in the form of an unexpected invitation. One afternoon, while Dave was in the middle of a strategy session with Sarah and Tim, his phone buzzed on the table. It was an email from an unknown address, and the subject line simply read, "An opportunity to meet Elon Musk." At first, Dave assumed it was spam, but something about it felt too real to ignore. He opened the email, his fingers trembling slightly as he scanned the words. "Dear Dave, we've been following your company's journey with great interest, and I'd like to personally invite you to a private meeting in Silicon Valley. I believe there may be a unique opportunity for collaboration between our companies. I look forward to discussing the details with you in person. Best, Elon Musk." Dave's heart skipped a beat. Elon Musk? The very name brought images of rockets, Tesla cars, and cutting-edge technology to mind. Was this a joke? A mistake? His mind raced as he thought about the possibilities. Elon Musk was a visionary, someone who had transformed multiple industries. A meeting with him could change everything for the company, opening doors to new ventures, partnerships, and growth. But there was also the question of what this would mean for the future of his company. Was he ready for this kind of opportunity? Was he prepared to take his company to that next level? He shared the email with Sarah and Tim, both of whom were equally stunned. "Is this real?" Tim asked, his eyes wide. "I mean, this could be huge for us, Dave. We've been putting in the work, and this is the kind of opportunity that could catapult us to the next level." Sarah, ever the voice of reason, raised a hand. "But before we jump in headfirst, we need to think this through. What's the purpose of this meeting? What's Elon's angle? And how do we stay true to our mission without losing ourselves in the process?" The questions lingered in the air, and Dave felt the weight of them all. As much as he wanted to seize the opportunity, he knew he couldn't afford to make another impulsive decision. This wasn't just about his business. It was about the future of the values he had worked so hard to build. After a long discussion, they decided that Dave would go, but only after carefully considering what they wanted from the meeting. They didn't want to compromise the heart of their company for the sake of growth. They needed to ensure that any partnership or collaboration aligned with their mission and vision. A week later, Dave found himself sitting on a plane to Silicon Valley, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This was a pivotal moment in his life, and he knew it. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he was determined to stay true to himself. When Dave arrived at SpaceX headquarters, he was greeted by a member of Elon's team, who escorted him through the sleek, modern building. The walls were adorned with images of rockets launching into the sky, and the atmosphere buzzed with the energy of innovation. It was everything Dave had imagined, and yet, as he walked through the corridors, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into something much bigger than himself. Finally, he was led into a conference room where Elon Musk was waiting. The tech mogul sat at the head of the table, his demeanor calm but intense, as if he was always thinking 10 steps ahead. "Dave," Elon said, standing to greet him with a firm handshake. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I've been following your company's journey for a while now. Impressive work." Dave was taken aback by Elon's straightforwardness. The man was as direct as his public persona suggested. But Dave kept his composure, sitting down across from him. "Thank you, Elon. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you. I've always admired your work," Dave replied. Elon wasted no time in getting to the point. "I think we could do some interesting things together. Your company's focus on sustainability and innovation is something I find compelling. We're looking to expand into new areas, and I think there's potential for us to collaborate on a larger scale. Dave listened intently as Elon outlined his vision for a partnership. The possibilities were exciting, but as Elon spoke, Dave couldn't help but feel a nagging sense of doubt. This wasn't just any deal, it was Elon Musk, and with that came a level of power and influence that could easily overshadow everything Dave had built. Could he maintain his company's authenticity in the face of such influence? Would they lose their identity in the pursuit of something bigger? Elon noticed Dave's hesitation and leaned in slightly, as if reading his thoughts. I understand your concerns, Elon said, but let me make one thing clear. This isn't about taking away from what you've built. It's about helping you scale your impact. We're aligned in our values. This could be a chance to bring your mission to an even larger audience, to make a difference in ways you might not have imagined. The words hung in the air, and Dave felt the weight of the decision before him. This was the moment that would shape his company's future, and it was also a moment of truth for him personally. Was he willing to let go of some control, to embrace a partnership that could push him beyond his limits, but also require him to compromise on certain things? He took a deep breath, looking Elon in the eye. The choice was his, and for the first time in a long while, Dave knew exactly what he had to do. I think, Dave said slowly, that we need to think this through carefully. I want to stay true to who we are, to the people who've supported us from the start. If we're going to work together, it has to be on our terms, with respect for what we've built. Elon smiled, nodding in approval. That's exactly what I like to hear. In that moment, Dave realized that this meeting wasn't just about business. It was a test of his own values, his ability to remain grounded even when faced with incredible opportunity. And in the end, that was the true measure of success. The days following his meeting with Elon Musk were a whirlwind for Dave. The magnitude of what had transpired hadn't fully hit him until he was back at the office. The idea of collaborating with one of the most powerful figures in the tech world was both exhilarating and daunting. The potential was undeniable, an opportunity to scale the business on a level he'd only dreamed of. Yet, despite the excitement, Dave couldn't shake the feeling that he had to be cautious. The stakes were higher now than ever before, and one wrong move could change everything. Dave called a meeting with Sarah, Tim, and a few other key members of his leadership team to discuss what had transpired. As they gathered around the table, the tension in the room was palpable. The air was thick with anticipation. Everyone had heard the news. Elon Musk, the figurehead of innovation and progress, had shown interest in their company. But now, the question was, should they say yes? Sarah spoke first. Dave, this could be huge for us. We've been doing well, but imagine what we could do with the resources and connections that come with partnering with someone like Elon. The possibilities are endless. Tim chimed in, it's hard to even fathom the kind of impact we could make if we scale this up. We could accelerate everything we're doing, take our mission to the world faster, and be part of something groundbreaking. The enthusiasm was palpable, but as Dave sat there listening, something nagged at him. He knew that all of these opportunities came with trade-offs. What was the cost of this kind of growth? What would happen to their brand, to the integrity of their mission, if they partnered with a larger-than-life figure like Elon Musk? He looked at his team, and for the first time in a long while, he felt conflicted. His gut told him one thing, but the allure of success told him another. We need to talk about what this really means, Dave said, his voice steady but filled with the weight of the decision ahead. This isn't just about scaling up. It's about who we are, what we stand for. We've built something with a foundation in authenticity, sustainability, and a commitment to our community. And I don't want to lose that. I don't want to compromise the core values that have brought us this far. There was silence in the room as his words sank in. Sarah, who had been the most vocal about the opportunity, now looked thoughtful. You're right, Dave. Our brand is about more than the product we make. It's about the people who believe in it and the change we're trying to create. If we partner with Elon, we need to make sure that everything we do aligns with that. Tim nodded. We've worked so hard to build this. We've faced down adversity. We've done it our way, on our terms. If we do this, it can't be just for the sake of profit or recognition. It has to be about expanding our impact in a way that feels right. Dave paused, considering their words. He knew they were right. The allure of partnering with Elon was tempting, but it was only valuable if it didn't undermine the foundation of what they had worked so hard to build. They had to be intentional about this step, about whether the partnership truly aligned with their mission and their values. After a long, tense pause, Dave made a decision. He stood up, his mind made up. We'll meet again, but we need to go in with a clear understanding of what we want. If we move forward, we do it on our terms. No compromises. We stay true to our mission. We don't just want to scale for the sake of scaling. We want to make an impact. If Elon is on board with that, then we'll talk. But if not, we'll walk away. The team nodded, their expressions a mixture of respect and agreement. Dave had made the call, and they trusted him to lead them through it. Over the next week, Dave and his team worked tirelessly to define exactly what they wanted from the partnership. They didn't just want more money or resources. They wanted to ensure that their brand would remain true to its roots. They drafted a list of values that had to be upheld, outlining the specifics of what they hoped to achieve through the collaboration. They wanted to leverage Elon's resources without losing the authenticity that had made their company unique. When they were finally ready, Dave arranged another meeting with Elon, this time with a clear agenda. He flew back to Silicon Valley, this time with a new sense of purpose. He wasn't just going to listen to what Elon had to offer. He was going to make sure the terms of the partnership reflected their vision, not just his own. The meeting took place in a sleek, minimalist conference room at SpaceX, with views of the valley stretching out in front of them. Elon greeted him warmly, but there was an air of business between them now. No small talk, just a mutual understanding that they were here to hash out the specifics. "Dave," Elon said, taking a seat across from him, "I'm glad to see you back. I trust you've had some time to think about what we discussed." Dave nodded. "Yes, I have. And I've spoken with my team. We're very interested in collaborating. But before we move forward, I need to be clear about something. Our brand is built on authenticity, sustainability, and community. We're not just about making money or scaling for the sake of it. We want to make sure that any collaboration we pursue aligns with those values." Elon looked at him thoughtfully, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, he leaned back in his chair and spoke in his characteristic calm, almost detached manner. "I respect that, Dave. I can see how passionate you are about your mission. And you're right. If we're going to work together, it has to be about more than just profit. It has to be about the impact. I've built companies that have transformed industries, but the most important thing is that the values align. If your team believes in that mission, and you believe in it too, then I'm willing to support you." Dave's heart settled slightly. Elon had said exactly what he needed to hear. He didn't just want to throw money at the company and let it grow. He wanted to support their vision in a way that stayed true to who they were. After a long conversation, they agreed to move forward with a partnership, one that would help Dave's company expand its reach and resources, but with a clear agreement that their values would remain central to everything they did. As Dave left SpaceX that day, he felt a sense of relief mixed with excitement. They had secured a partnership with one of the biggest names in business, but more importantly, they had done it on their terms. They hadn't compromised their values, their mission, or their sense of self. Dave knew that this was the beginning of something even bigger. But it was also the beginning of a new chapter, one where authenticity and purpose would always come first. In the weeks following the pivotal meeting with Elon Musk, things began to feel like a slow burn. Dave's company was on the brink of something enormous, but the weight of what they had just agreed to hung over him. The partnership was official, but the real work, making sure they kept their integrity intact while navigating the waters of rapid expansion, was only just beginning. The office was buzzing with excitement. People were talking about the new opportunities on the horizon, speculating about the potential impact the partnership with Musk could have on their products, their reach, and their influence. But as the noise grew louder, Dave found himself withdrawing into his thoughts more and more. The truth was, he was still grappling with what it all meant. Could they really scale without losing themselves? Would they be able to maintain their authenticity in a world that was so obsessed with growth and success? As Dave sat in his office late one evening, staring at the contracts he had just signed, Sarah walked in, breaking the silence. "You all right?" she asked, her tone soft but knowing. Sarah had always been able to read him like a book. Dave gave a small smile, leaning back in his chair. I don't know. I'm excited, sure, but I'm also scared. This is a huge shift for us. And the more I think about it, the more I wonder if we can really pull it off. Sarah sat across from him, folding her arms. You're not alone in that fear. We're all in this together, Dave. But I think you made the right call. We've built something special here, and no partnership is going to change that unless we let it. Dave nodded, though his mind was still racing. I just keep thinking about the people who've stuck with us through thick and thin. They didn't sign up for this. They signed up for something that felt real, something with heart. I don't want to lose that. You won't, Sarah said firmly. You're the one leading this ship, and you know where we're going. It's about balance. We scale, but we don't forget where we came from. We keep the heart, the soul, and the people at the center of everything. Her words were comforting, but Dave's unease didn't dissipate. He had spent years building this company, nurturing it from the ground up, and now it felt like he was at a crossroads. This was the opportunity to take things to the next level, but what if that next level meant compromising everything he had worked for? What if they became just another corporate giant, selling out to the highest bidder and forgetting their roots? I hope you're right, Dave said, his voice quieter now. I hope we can scale without becoming part of the machine. Sarah smiled, standing up to leave. We can. We just have to remember who we are. And you'll make sure of that. You always do. As she left, Dave sat back in his chair, trying to quiet the storm of doubts in his head. The reality of their situation was becoming clearer by the day. The partnership with Musk wasn't just an opportunity, it was a test. A test of his leadership, of their vision, and of their ability to navigate a world that demanded success at all costs. The next few days were a blur. There were meetings with Elon's team, discussions about integrating new technologies, and planning for the expansion of their product line. The pace was relentless, and while Dave knew this was the price of success, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the edge of something that could either propel them forward or tear them apart. It was on one of those busy days that Dave received an unexpected call. It was from Tim, who was in the middle of a meeting with a new partner who had expressed interest in investing heavily in their company. Dave, you're going to want to hear this, Tim said, his voice urgent. There's a competitor who's been eyeing us. They've got a huge war chest, and they're ready to throw everything they have at us. They want to push us out of the market. Dave's heart sank. What do they want? They're offering us a buyout, Tim replied. They're trying to pressure us into taking the money and stepping aside, but we know we're better than that. I don't want to go down that road, Dave, but I need to know if we stand a chance against this kind of attack. They're going to pull every trick in the book. Dave's mind was spinning. First, the partnership with Elon Musk, and now this? It felt like the universe was testing him on all fronts. A buyout? They had just signed a deal with Musk. Were they really in danger of being bought out, to be pushed aside by a competitor who saw them as a threat? Are they serious? Dave asked, already knowing the answer. They've got the capital, the influence, and the power. They're not bluffing, Tim said. But here's the thing. We've built this from the ground up. We've got the heart, and we've got the people who believe in what we're doing. We can't just give that up. Dave stood up, pacing the room. No, we're not selling out. Not now, not ever. We've worked too hard for this. We're not just going to hand over everything we've built because they've got deep pockets. There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment before Tim spoke again. I agree, but we need a plan. We can't let them take us down without a fight. Let's meet in the morning and figure out what we're going to do. Dave hung up the phone, a renewed sense of purpose flooding his body. It was clear that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. They had just reached a new level of success, and with it came new threats, new challenges. But one thing was certain, he wasn't going to give up without a fight. He looked out the window, the city sprawling beneath him. It was easy to get caught up in the excitement, in the growth and the expansion. But at this moment, Dave knew one thing with absolute clarity. The heart of his company was what had gotten them this far, and it was the only thing that would keep them from losing everything. They would stand their ground, and they would fight for what they believed in. The weeks that followed the call from Tim were a whirlwind of strategizing, meetings, and sleepless nights. Dave knew that the next few months would determine the future of his company and potentially his legacy. The buyout offer from their competitor wasn't just a challenge to their survival. It was a challenge to their very existence as a company that had always prided itself on being different, on staying true to its roots. The team worked around the clock to gather information, analyze their position in the market, and come up with a plan to defend themselves. Tim, Sarah, and the rest of the leadership team were all hands on deck, making sure they were prepared for anything. The competitor had deep pockets, and their influence was far-reaching, but Dave wasn't ready to go down without a fight. Every day felt like a battle, with calls and emails from investors, partners, and even the media, who were starting to catch wind of the tensions in the industry. It was hard to focus on the excitement of the partnership with Elon Musk when every move felt like it could either solidify their future or ruin it. One afternoon, Dave sat in the conference room with Tim, Sarah, and their lead strategist, Mark. The tension in the room was palpable. They had spent the last few hours reviewing the competitors' financials, their market strategy, and their offer. There were no surprises. The competitor was aggressive and well-funded, but they hadn't yet made a move that truly threatened Dave's company. That was about to change. So, what's the play here? Tim asked, breaking the silence. We know they're coming for us, and they've got the resources to make a run at it. But we've got something they don't. Dave nodded, leaning forward. We've got loyalty. We've got the heart of this company, and we've got the people who've been with us from the start. We're not just going to roll over and let them buy us out, but we need to be smart. We can't fight them on their terms. Mark, who had been quietly studying the competitors' moves, spoke up. We're in a good position because of our brand. People know who we are. We've built something real. What we need to do is use that to our advantage. If we start talking to the public, if we start showcasing how we've always put people first, we can build a narrative around us that makes it impossible for them to buy us out. We turn this into a David versus Goliath story. Sarah nodded, her face set with determination. I like it. If we can turn the tables and make this about more than just a business deal, make it about the people who believe in what we're doing, we can rally support. Dave rubbed his hands together, feeling a sense of purpose wash over him. This was what he needed to hear. They couldn't just play defense. They had to go on the offense. What's the first step? Dave asked. We need to talk to our customers, Tim said. We need to remind them why we're different. We need to show them that we're not some corporate giant just trying to sell them a product. We're a company built on trust and integrity. Mark chimed in, and we need to get the media involved. If we can create a wave of support from the public, we can force the competitor's hand. They won't be able to buy us if the public believes in us. It was a risky move, but Dave knew that they couldn't afford to sit back and wait. The competitor wasn't going to stop just because they were afraid of public backlash. They were going to push harder, dig deeper, and try to buy their way into dominance. But if they could make this about more than just money, if they could make it about values, about the people who had built the company from the ground up, they could win. That night, Dave sat in his office, looking out over the city. It was a rare moment of quiet, and as he thought about everything that had happened, he realized how far they had come. The partnership with Elon Musk, the competitor's buyout offer, the pressure mounting on all sides. It felt like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. But there was one thing he knew for sure. He wasn't going to let this company go down without a fight. He picked up his phone and dialed Elon's number. The phone rang twice before Elon picked up. Dave, Elon's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. How's everything going? Have you thought more about our next steps? I have, Dave replied, his voice steady. But there's something else I need to talk to you about. Elon, we've got a competitor breathing down our necks. They've just offered us a buyout, and we need to figure out a way to hold our ground. There was silence on the other end for a moment, and Dave wondered if he had said the wrong thing. But then Elon spoke. I know who you're talking about, Elon said, his voice suddenly sharper. I've been watching the market, and if they want to fight, they've got one. But I'm going to be honest with you, Dave. This isn't going to be easy. They have resources we don't. I know, Dave said, rubbing his forehead. But we have something they don't. We've got the people, the loyalty. We're not just another startup. They can't buy that. They can't buy trust. Elon was quiet for a moment. Then, he spoke with surprising warmth. You're right. They can't buy that. And if we're going to do this, We need to make it clear to everyone, employees, customers, the market, that what we're building is about more than just money. It's about changing the world. Dave felt a surge of confidence. That's what I want to do. I don't want to be just another business. I want to leave a legacy. You will, Elon said, with a certainty that resonated deep within Dave. We'll do this together. But you need to lead. You need to fight for what you believe in. In the following days, the strategy began to take shape. They launched a public campaign that highlighted their commitment to the community, to sustainability, and to creating products that truly mattered. Dave took to social media, sharing stories from employees, from loyal customers, and from people who had supported them along the way. The message was simple. This wasn't just about business. It was about heart. The response was overwhelming. Messages of support flooded in from all corners of the world. Customers sent messages, social media posts went viral, and soon, news outlets were picking up the story. It became a movement. Dave's company was no longer just a startup fighting for its survival. It was a symbol of what could happen when people stayed true to their values, even in the face of overwhelming odds. But just as the public support was growing, so too was the intensity of the competitors' actions. They weren't going to back down easily, and Dave knew that the fight was far from over. The weeks after the public campaign began were a whirlwind. Dave's company had stirred something far beyond their wildest expectations. News outlets picked up on their story, and the media coverage skyrocketed. Articles highlighted the struggle of a small company trying to survive in a cutthroat market dominated by larger, more powerful players. It was the underdog narrative that everyone loved, and it struck a chord with people across the globe. But as Dave had learned, every victory came with its own set of challenges. The competitor, still eager to take them down, wasn't backing off. If anything, they were doubling down, intensifying their efforts, and throwing money at every angle. Their strategy was simple: overwhelm, outspend, and wait for Dave to crack under the pressure. In the midst of this turmoil, something unexpected happened. Dave's phone buzzed one afternoon, an unknown number flashing on the screen. He hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello, this is Dave." "Dave, it's Jason. Jason Williams from Skytech Industries." Dave's pulse quickened. Skytech Industries was one of the biggest tech companies in the market. Their products weren't just cutting edge, they were everywhere, from home devices to autonomous vehicles. The fact that Jason Williams was calling him was not something Dave had expected. "Jason, what's going on? How can I help you?" Dave tried to keep his voice steady, though he was definitely thrown off. "I've been following your story, Dave, and I've got to say, I'm impressed. It takes guts to stand up to a company like that. I've got a proposition for you." Dave furrowed his brow. "Proposition?" "Yeah, look, I'm not one for making public statements, but I've got resources, and I'm in a position where I can make a move to support your company, to throw some weight behind your fight." Dave leaned back in his chair, trying to process what Jason was saying. "You want to help us? Why?" Jason's voice was calm but firm. "I've seen too many small companies get swallowed whole by these corporate giants. We've all been there. Skytech started as a small startup too. We know how hard it is to keep your values when the market is so focused on growth at any cost." Dave hesitated. This was big, but could he trust it? Could he trust someone from a company of Skytech's magnitude? "Jason, I appreciate the offer, but why now? You've got your own empire. Why step into this?" "I'm not doing this out of charity, Dave," Jason replied, a hint of amusement in his voice. "I'm doing it because I believe in the fight, and because I believe that we can change things. There's a chance here to not just beat your competitor, but to send a message to the entire industry." Dave felt the weight of the conversation settle in. The idea of aligning with such a powerful ally was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. Skytech's support could turn the tide in their favor, but it could also come with strings attached. They weren't exactly known for being a company with a lot of loyalty to small players. "I'll be honest, Jason, I'm not sure how this would work. What are you proposing?" "I'm proposing an investment," Jason said without hesitation. "We come in, we help you scale, and we show the competitor that you're not just a small company with a big heart. You're a force to be reckoned with. Together, we can go toe-to-toe with anyone." The proposition was tempting. Having a company like Skytech backing them would provide an immediate boost, both financially and in terms of credibility. It could give Dave's company the kind of firepower they needed to push back against their competitor. But the question was, at what cost? "I need time to think about this," Dave said, feeling the gravity of the decision pressing on him. "I'll talk to my team, and we'll figure out what the next step is." "I understand," Jason replied. "But know this, time is of the essence. Your competitor isn't waiting around." After a long pause, Jason added, "And I'll be clear with you, Dave, this offer won't last forever. Think about it." As soon as Dave hung up, he reached for his phone and dialed Sarah. The weight of the conversation was still hanging over him, and he needed her perspective. "Sarah, I just got a call," he said, his voice a little unsteady. "From Jason Williams at Skytech. He wants to invest, to back us in the fight against our competitor." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line before Sarah responded. "Skytech? That's a big player. What did you say?" "I told him I needed time to think. But honestly, this could be exactly what we need to fight back. They've got the resources, the power, and they want to help us scale." Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering. "It's tempting, Dave. Really tempting. But you know as well as I do that nothing comes for free with companies like Skytech. If they invest, they're going to want control. They'll want a piece of what we're building. Can you live with that?" Dave thought about it, the decision weighing on him. Could he really sell part of his soul to keep his company alive? Or could there be a way to balance the alliance with Skytech without losing their identity? The truth was, he didn't have an answer yet. "I don't know, Sarah," he said finally. "But if we don't do something soon, we might not have a choice." The next few days were filled with sleepless nights, endless discussions with his team, and meetings to figure out how best to navigate the situation. Dave kept coming back to the same question. Could he afford to turn down this offer from Skytech, even if it came with risks? Or was it time to swallow his pride and take the help they needed to survive? Meanwhile, the competitors' tactics grew more aggressive. Their marketing blitzes were hitting harder, and rumors spread that they were gearing up for a hostile takeover. Dave could feel the pressure mounting, the walls closing in around them. Then came a moment of clarity. A simple thought. He couldn't do it alone. And maybe, just maybe, Skytech was the ally they needed. Not just for the financial backing, but for the network, the influence, and the chance to truly take the fight to their competitor. They could use Skytech's power to amplify their voice and keep their values intact. After a tense meeting with his team, Dave made the decision. They would take Skytech's offer, but on their terms. They would negotiate for autonomy in the areas that mattered most to them. The heart of the company, the culture, the product. They would take the investment, but they would fight to keep their integrity intact. And with that decision, Dave felt a sense of resolve settle over him. This was just the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where alliances would be forged, battles would be fought, and everything he had built would be tested. But he wasn't alone anymore. The decision had been made. After much contemplation, long nights, and heated discussions, Dave had finally agreed to Skytech's offer. The support they'd need to keep fighting was undeniable. Yet, even as he made the call to Jason Williams to finalize the deal, he felt a deep sense of unease. The stakes had never been higher. They were about to enter a new phase, one where their autonomy would be tested, and they would have to tread carefully to maintain their identity and values. The news of their partnership with Skytech broke the next morning. Headlines filled with the story of the small company taking on industry giants with the backing of one of the most powerful tech companies in the world. The reactions were immediate and intense. The public response was overwhelmingly positive at first. People admired Dave's decision to fight for what he believed in, and the backing of Skytech gave them the resources they needed to truly compete. Their social media following surged, and customers rallied behind them in a way Dave hadn't anticipated. It was as if the world was watching them, cheering them on, hoping they could pull off the impossible. But just as quickly as the support had grown, the first cracks began to show. The competitor, sensing weakness, accelerated their own efforts. They launched a counter-campaign, attacking Skytech's involvement and accusing Dave's company of selling out. They painted a picture of a small company whose ideals were now for sale to the highest bidder. The media, ever hungry for a story, latched onto the narrative, questioning whether Dave could truly stay true to his values with Skytech now in the mix. For the first time since this battle had started, Dave felt like the walls were closing in around him. The pressure was mounting from every direction. He felt betrayed by the very public that had once cheered him on. Some of his own employees started to question the direction of the company. Could they still say they were committed to the same values they'd once preached? Was it worth it? The phone call that shattered the fragile sense of calm came late one evening. "Dave, it's Tim," came the voice on the other end. It sounded strained, tense. "We need to talk. Now." Dave immediately sat up, his heart rate accelerating. Something was wrong. "Tim, what's going on?" "I don't know how to say this, but there's been a shift with the team. Some of the people we've counted on, employees, key partners, they're starting to have doubts. There are whispers that we're compromising our values for the money and influence Skytech brings to the table." Dave's stomach dropped. I don't know what to do anymore, Tim. We needed their support. We needed Skytech as resources. But now it feels like I've lost control of everything." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'm not saying we're done, but we need to address this. You need to step in, Dave. You need to remind the team what we're fighting for. We can't let this break us. We need you to be the one to set the tone." The weight of Tim's words sank deep into Dave's chest. He had promised himself that they would never become just another faceless corporation. But now, with Skytech's influence expanding, he feared they were teetering on the edge of losing everything that had made them unique. The following morning, Dave called an emergency meeting with the entire team. The energy in the room was tense as he walked in, his face a mixture of resolve and uncertainty. Everyone was aware of the public backlash, and whispers had spread like wildfire through the company. This was their moment to either rally together or risk falling apart. "Everyone, listen up," Dave began, his voice firm but with a noticeable edge. "I know things have been messy lately. There's been a lot of talk, both inside and outside of this company. We've got people telling us that we've sold out, that we've lost our way." He paused, taking a deep breath. "But here's the truth. We're not selling out. We're fighting. We're fighting for what we believe in. We're fighting for the people who've supported us from day one. And we're fighting for this company's future. No one, no competitor, no media, no external pressure, is going to take that from us." The room was silent. Every eye was fixed on him, waiting for him to continue. He could see the concern in their faces, but there was also something else, hope. A flicker of belief that maybe, just maybe, they could get through this. "We've partnered with Skytech, but we haven't sold our soul," Dave continued. "We're still us. We're still the company that has always put people first. The world is watching us, and now we have a choice. We can let the pressure break us, or we can rise above it. We're not going to let anyone redefine who we are. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever." A murmur of agreement spread through the room. Slowly, employees began to nod, their resolve strengthening. It was as if Dave's words had reignited something in them, a reminder of why they joined this company in the first place. They weren't just employees. They were a family, and together, they were strong. "We can do this," Sarah spoke up from the back of the room, her voice cutting through the tension. "But we have to stand united. We have to remind the world that we're more than just a company. We're a movement, and we're going to fight for the future, no matter what it takes." Dave felt a surge of relief. This was why he had started this company. This was the reason he had fought so hard. It wasn't for the money, the fame, or the power. It was for the people, for the values that had kept them going, even when it seemed like the odds were stacked against them. "We're not alone," Dave said, his voice stronger now. "We have the support of our customers. We have the support of our employees. And we have the support of the people who believe in us. We will not let this company become something it was never meant to be." As he looked around the room, Dave saw a renewed sense of purpose in his team's eyes. They were ready to fight. They were ready to rise above the pressure and prove that they could do things differently. Together, they could take on any challenge. The emotional climax had arrived. Dave was no longer the uncertain leader who had feared making the wrong decision. He had embraced the weight of the choice he'd made, and now, more than ever, he understood the true meaning of leadership. It wasn't about making the right decision every time. It was about sticking to your values, no matter how hard things got. And now, with the full support of his team, he was more determined than ever to lead them through this storm. They would not be defined by their setbacks or the pressures from outside forces. They would be defined by their mission, by their people, and by the fight they were willing to give to create something better. The real battle had just begun. The months following the emotional rallying cry were nothing short of a whirlwind. Dave's company had been thrust into the spotlight in ways they never anticipated. The initial backlash from the partnership with Skytech had given way to an overwhelming show of support from their loyal customers and partners. People respected that they had stuck to their principles, despite the immense pressure from all sides. It was clear. They weren't just fighting for a piece of the market. They were fighting for a new kind of business, a business that could thrive without compromising its values. But now, it was time for the final showdown. The competitor, still clinging to the hope that they could crush Dave's company, had been relentless in their attempts to dominate the market. They had used every dirty trick in the book, misleading advertisements, smear campaigns, and even offering hefty buyout offers to Dave's most loyal employees. Every corner they turned, it felt like they were being cornered. The moment that Dave had been dreading had finally arrived, the hostile takeover attempt. It came with a massive offer, more money than Dave had ever seen in his life. The competitor wanted everything: the assets, the intellectual property, the people. They promised wealth beyond his wildest dreams, but the price was simple: surrender the company and everything it stood for. Dave knew what he had to do. He had a meeting scheduled that day with Skytech's top executives. Jason Williams had flown in to meet with him personally, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. The fate of the company rested on this conversation. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about making sure they stayed true to who they were, even if it meant losing everything. "I'm not selling out, Jason," Dave said firmly as they sat down in the sleek, glass-walled boardroom overlooking the city skyline. "They think they can buy me, buy this company, but I won't let that happen. We're going to fight. This is our moment." Jason didn't respond right away. He was calm, his fingers lightly drumming on the polished wood of the table. After a few moments of silence, he leaned forward. "You're right, Dave. This is your company. But the question is, can you afford to fight back? This competitor is playing a different game. They're playing for total control." Dave shook his head. "I don't care about the money. I never did. I care about the people who've been with us from the start, the ones who believed in what we could do. We've come too far to back down now." Jason's gaze softened for a moment. "You're a rare breed, Dave. Most would have folded by now. But I'm not going to lie to you. The competitor is ruthless. We've got their attention. We can help, but this isn't going to be easy. I know it's not going to be easy, but it's not about being easy. It's about what's right. We've got to stand tall and remind the world that businesses like ours matter. We're more than just numbers. We're more than just the bottom line." Jason nodded slowly, then leaned back in his chair, his eyes locking with Dave's. "All right, let's do this then. We'll give them the fight they're asking for." The next few weeks were a blur of strategy meetings, marketing pushes, and high-stakes negotiations. Skytech's resources gave them a significant boost, but it wasn't just the financial backing that would make the difference. It was the way Dave's company used their voice to rally the people. It was about the message they sent to the world, that they weren't afraid to fight for what they believed in. The competitors' attacks became more desperate, but so did their tactics. As the battle for the market raged on, it was clear that they had underestimated Dave and his team's resolve. The public campaign highlighting the company's commitment to ethical practices, transparency, and people-first values gained traction. It was clear that Dave's company wasn't just another faceless corporation. They were a movement. The final blow came in a live-streamed event, a public forum where both companies would present their visions for the future. Dave stood at the podium, eyes bright with determination. He had a simple message to convey. They were the future of business, one where integrity, innovation, and heart could coexist. Meanwhile, the competitor tried to drown out his message with aggressive advertisements and threats, but it was too late. The people had spoken. The resolution came not with a loud crash, but with a quiet sense of victory. The competitor, unable to sustain their attack, finally backed down. Their shareholders had begun to pull out, the public was turning against them, and they realized that the fight for public trust and loyalty couldn't be won through money alone. Dave's company, despite the obstacles and challenges, had emerged stronger than ever. Skytech's support had been pivotal, but it was the company's unwavering commitment to its values that had ultimately won the battle. In the aftermath, Dave sat at his desk, looking out over the city skyline. The world had changed, and so had he. They had made it through the storm, not because they had the biggest resources or the most powerful allies, but because they had remained true to themselves. They had fought for something bigger than profits, something that resonated with people. The lessons were clear. True success wasn't measured in dollar signs. It was measured in the impact you made, the people you touched, and the integrity you held onto when everything seemed to be slipping away. As he closed his eyes for a moment, reflecting on the journey, Dave felt an overwhelming sense of pride. He had built something real, something that would endure. The future was uncertain, yes, but it was theirs to shape. And that was enough. The story closes with a sense of resolution as Dave and his company look toward the future. The battle may have been won, but it was only one chapter in a much larger story. The company's legacy was secured, not just in the products they created, but in the way they fought for what they believed in. The message was clear. Integrity, loyalty, and purpose would always triumph over money and power. As the credits rolled, the message resonated, reminding the audience that the greatest victories come not from defeating the enemy, but from remaining true to oneself, no matter the cost. Dave sat at his desk, staring out the window of his office. The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over the city. A soft breeze wafted in through the open window, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a deep sense of peace. It had been months since the battle for his company had come to an end, and in that time, his life had transformed in ways he never could have imagined. The pressure, the fear, the constant fight, it all seemed like a distant memory now. What had once felt like an insurmountable challenge had, in the end, propelled him into a new chapter of his life. His company was thriving, stronger than it had ever been. The partnership with Skytech had given them the resources they needed to scale, but it was the authenticity and integrity they had maintained that truly set them apart in the market. People were drawn to them, not just because of the products they created, but because they represented something bigger. They were a company that stood for values that mattered. Dave's personal life had also taken a turn for the better. He had reconnected with old friends, mended relationships that had once seemed beyond repair, and even found the time to pursue hobbies and passions he had long forgotten. The weight he had carried for so long had lifted, and in its place was a sense of purpose, a clarity about what truly mattered. But what stood out to Dave more than anything was the shift within himself. He no longer felt like a man who was simply trying to survive in a cutthroat world. He felt empowered to grow, to evolve, and to create something that would last. He had learned that challenges weren't just obstacles to overcome. They were opportunities for growth, for reinvention. As he leaned back in his chair, he reflected on everything he had learned along the way. He thought about the early days of the company, when he had taken that first leap of faith without knowing what the future would hold. He thought about the people who had supported him, the ones who had believed in the vision when it seemed impossible. And he thought about the moment when everything changed. The day he had stood up and made the decision to fight for what he believed in, no matter the cost. Dave had never been one to back down from a challenge, but what he realized now was that the greatest challenge wasn't in battling his competitors or navigating the business world. It was in battling the doubts within himself. It was in having the courage to face his fears, to take risks, and to trust that the journey, no matter how uncertain, would be worth it in the end. And that's what he wanted to share with others. He picked up his phone and opened a new post on social media. It was time to write something that had been on his mind for a while, a message that he hoped would inspire those who needed it most. He began typing, "Life is full of surprises. The most unexpected encounters can lead to the greatest transformations. Don't be afraid to take chances, to face your fears head-on. The road may be tough, but it's in those moments of uncertainty that we discover who we truly are. Keep moving forward, keep believing, and never underestimate the power of starting over. Every challenge is an opportunity to become better, stronger, and more resilient than you were before." The journey isn't about where you end up, it's about who you become along the way. Embrace it. He hit post and leaned back again, feeling a sense of fulfillment. This message wasn't just for his followers. It was for himself too. A reminder that no matter what came next, he had everything he needed to face it. As the days passed, Dave's post resonated with people from all walks of life. Messages of gratitude and encouragement flooded in, many from people who had faced their own battles and were now finding the courage to pursue their dreams. Dave realized that the impact of his journey wasn't just about the company he had built, but about the people it had inspired along the way. He had come full circle. The boy who had once been afraid of failure was now the man who embraced it, understanding that growth came from pushing through adversity and learning from each experience. The unexpected encounters, like the flight with Elon Musk, had shaped him in ways he couldn't have imagined. But it was the decision to stay true to his values, to fight for what he believed in, that had ultimately led him to this moment. One evening, as he sat in the quiet of his office, Dave felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. He had fought for something real, something that mattered. And through it all, he had grown, personally, professionally, and spiritually. He looked at the framed picture on his desk, a photo of his team at the company's first office celebration, smiling and celebrating a small but significant victory. It was a reminder of where they had come from, of how far they had all come together. "Here's to new beginnings," he whispered to himself, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. The future, he realized, was wide open, and it was theirs to shape. Life is full of surprises. The most unexpected encounters can lead to the greatest transformations. Don't be afraid to take chances, to face your fears. The journey may be hard, but it's through those challenges that we become who we were always meant to be. Keep moving forward, because the best is yet to come. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?